Hey everybody, Stew Smith here and Jeff Nichols with another Tactical Fitness Report. Jeff, Happy New Year!
Same to you, my good man. And I know other than just that, just the new year has brought I guess some free time. So congratulations,
Yes,
family.
yes, yes, yeah, busy year. It's been a busy year, but a fun one. So Jeff, the other day I was watching your reels on, I guess you did a live on Instagram. Really good one. You brought up the topic of gut checks, and I thought it was worthwhile just discussing that a little bit more in depth and how are they useful, maybe define them, you know
Yeah, right.
you know
Yeah, it's kind of a Pandora's box. I think we could go a bunch of different ways, right? Like even it's just like it really can. So that's kind of where we're just gonna just unpack this and see where it goes. I think a gut check comes along with it kind of a bit of a negative connotation by some, and some it's like, yeah, it's desirable. And so I guess that's kind of the first thing is for me, gut check is a part of training. So I'm going to say, okay, can I put a gut check and what is it? So for me, I think a smart way to go about doing it is, again, it's going to be relevant to the person's training, their current state of training, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
yep.
But I think that when it comes to doing a gut check, if you plan something knowing like, hey, if I'm going to go the Navy route, what's the longest run that's going to happen? Well, that's not super long, but okay, that in itself could be a gut check just to work up toward that. But you could say, okay, what's the average day? What's a kind of a difficult day look like at Buds? Is it get up early, you do a conditioning run, you do an O course, you do classroom, like, so we're like, really, what are we looking for a caloric expenditure in time? So let's say like maybe in total physical output work, maybe you're doing 3 or 4 hours a day. That's not talking just being awake, but like moving and doing stuff and training and being tested. So
Yeah.
let's say you want to do a gut check that's relevant to a day at Buds and go, hey, I'm gonna plan like a bike run sort of ruck, and I'm gonna try to make sure it encompasses a 2 hours of time, right? And have some milestones and make it to where it's like, well, it's also long enough. I might have to reconsider how am I going to refuel it in during. So there it kind of becomes a simulation. The gut check should become more of a simulation, in my opinion, than just like, well, I'm going to do this thing that's going to test me. It's like, well, how's it going to
Right.
test you? It's gonna be hard. Well, how's that a test? Like I'm not in favor of it, but I'm also like saying, hey, let's kind of structure it in a smart way.
Yeah, I love what you just said about you can use them to simulate a long day of training that you will have to be able to endure, but you can also use them to create strategies around how you're refueling, how you're hydrating. You
How it
have to
affects sleep.
Oh yeah, how it affects how you recovered.
Right.
One of the things I like to do is not necessarily time a workout to make it more intense. Just get crap reps for 30 minutes, right?
Right.
That's one way to increase the intensity, but at the same time, are they really good reps that you're doing? What I like to do if we're doing a lot of volume, not necessarily worry about the time, worry about the form, the technique, and then assess not necessarily did you finish it or not, how do you feel 2 days later? How have you
Right.
recovered? So for me,
Right.
an example would be, you chest carry lunge with a sandbag and do a lap around the track with it, nonstop. Can you do that? That's not an impossible task. For some, it's an absolute gut check, right? But if you build up to it, do it without weight, increase the weight, do it over time, maybe add it once a week, and the next thing you know, it's easy and you're not sore 2 days later. Whereas you may have been sore for 2, 3 days, your first attempt at lunging. And obviously, there's a progression into getting 400 yards. You would start off with 100 yards and
Right.
200 yards. So all of these have to be a progression. So the one thing I hate about gut checks is a lot of people will just do this out of progression challenge that winds up hurting them. And what I mean by that would be like someone who's on a running plan like we have, they're getting, say, 20 miles a week or something, and then all of a sudden they say, I'm going to test myself and see if I can run a marathon this weekend,
Right.
right? With no preparation whatsoever. Chances are, young person, be a little sore for a couple of days, but could also risk injury where you got shin splints, stress fracture, tendonitis, that's going to prevent you from running for the next 6 weeks. So that's when a gut check is useless.
Right. Yep.
You've done nothing. You haven't gotten tougher. You've degraded your body to where you can't train the way you were supposed to. And you probably didn't really learn a whole lot out of it, other than maybe I shouldn't have done that. If that's what you learned after a gut check, yeah, I'm sorry. If that's what you learned after a gut check, it wasn't a gut check. It was stupid.
Right. So here's this whole thing. I want to swing this around because it goes back to what you and I always say. Like, what's the first piece of advice? Is pick a good timeline. If you've chosen a good timeline, and typically I say like, hey, God, like, let's give yourself at least a year, depending on what your situation is. Let's just say a year, right? And that's typically what I say. And I'm going to say in that year, if you want to plan a gut check, do one every quarter. And it's one of like increasing difficulty, but there's still parameters that remain in each milestone that give you a point of measurement. So you build a run, swim, ruck. You're at 3 months in at a certain mileage, distance, and location. Then you do it later and you do the same thing. Maybe you increase distance or you add a fourth component to that like sort of triathlon situation, or something where you can be like, hey, it's getting more difficult, or you mix them up and you put them, you know what I mean? So it's like you're doing them under a more fatigued state. So whatever it might be, but you make this plan ahead of time, because here's the thing. Because if we're talking about being all these things, if you can set a plan up for the year, follow through with that plan for the year, measure yourself for that year, by the end of that year, you're going to be a stud. And
yes,
do or I, and you're going to be like, yeah, I got this thing. I got to get this thing in Coronado. I'm going to go do.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, I've always considered there's 2 gut checks, and one of them is something you can do every single day, and that is wake up early, even when you don't feel like it, and go get something done. Because there's nothing quite like being comfortable when an alarm goes off, and you got to wake yourself up, and it's cold outside and the water's wet and everything that you don't feel like getting uncomfortable, and you do it anyway. I mean, that right there is a gut check.
I think that I agree. I think normalizing what I hear you, Stu, say in my mind, what it means to me, in my heart, that I totally agree with, is normalize getting up early, because it's not just about getting up early. I realize now it's not about that. Like, I've got up early, I got up first. It's like, no, it's like, okay, when I get up early enough, regularly enough, consistently enough, my body, it's ready to do things. Like I was saying, because Stu's like, get up and go do things, be productive. But if you don't get up regularly, your body, like, why do we don't like getting up early? Because my bowel movements, my appetite, my things, none of them are in order. But if I normalize getting up at a regular early time, all of those things that are irritable when we have to rush out the door from getting up at a late alarm, that's how you avoid all that tardiness of bowel movements, tardiness of lethargy, tardiness of, it is normalized getting up early. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, plus it's just preparing you for getting up early at whatever selection you're doing, because I promise you, you won't sleep in till 8 or 9 o'clock every day. No. Your day starts long before the sun comes up, and will likely finish when the sun goes down.
Yeah, but that's the reality too, is because how else do we look? I mean, it's such a simple thing what the military's done. They've taken the thing that society has not normalized anymore, and that's getting up early and going to bed when the sun, because of electronics, like, awesome. We have we're lights away from lights. So Now because of that, just we're just preying off people's lack of like, whoa, like get up when and do what by when. And I think that you're right. If you can start to normalize that before you get the shock and awe of the military, it's not shock and awe. And I think that that's where there's probably athletes that you train regularly, like let's say swimmers or water polo, and because for some reason regionally swimmers and water polo always had the super early morning workouts or something,
Yep.
they always had a super high success rate in selection. You're like, I don't get it. And you're like, no, it's because they normalized being really uncomfortable for a long time. So when they showed up at selection, they're like, no, man, you can sleep in till 5. Like,
Right.
well,
Right.
because I was getting up at 3:30 every day, get to
Yeah.
practice. Now I'm gonna sleep into 5 at Buds. Like I think at Buds I got up at like 4:50. I think that's when I got up,
Yeah. Same.
something like that. Like 5
Same.
a.m. just before 5 a.m. But it was just it for me because I was a strength coach at Troy, and I was opening the gym every morning at 5 a.m. for Air Force and Army ROTC. When I got to the Navy, I got to Navy boot camp and everything. And everything was like, oh, this is getting up early. I got this. This is way better. I'm so
Yeah.
fortunate. It was like I didn't know that I was going to get this benefit, but I did.
Right. Yeah, I was the same way. I've always been an early morning guy, but there are days, even when you're an early morning guy, that you you have to just say, you know what, I really don't want to do this today, but I'm going to go do it anyway. Once again, that's a nice little gut check. And then when you talk about a physical gut check, unfortunately, it's all relative. Like you can create a nice little gut check for somebody that it might be as simple as, all right, you do 50 push-ups and walk a mile, and that's going to be a big test for that person,
Yeah.
right? That would be somebody who doesn't walk and doesn't do push-ups. That's going to be really tough. Whereas someone who is well into their progression of training for spec ops, you're going to warm up with a Murph and then go do your run, swim, ruck,
Yeah.
and that might be considered a gut check.
Yeah. Because the
So
reality, I think that there's this weird conundrum we play with is like the truth of our military selection is they take, well, how long does Buds last? 26 to 27 weeks. So it's almost 6 months, or it's at 6 months. It's a long time. Then you have SQT. Then you have, so my point, but all these gut checks that are typically sold or understood to be gut checks in society are a day, maybe 2 days or 3 days, right? And you're like, did you get anything out of it? It's like, well, for that duration, they very well could have. But
yeah,
to extract for me personally, there's a couple things that I could say tangibly that I felt these were the most difficult things for me at Buds. The most difficult thing for me at Buds, per se, was its length of time.
yeah,
It wasn't any given day. It wasn't Hell Week. It wasn't drown proofing. It wasn't pool comp. It wasn't any of those things. It was just like, really, like, I got to do this every freaking day for the next 6 months. This is extreme. And so for me, a gut check as a coach who I'm saying, I get candidates that, hey, I want to be spec war. I go, okay, here's the biggest gut check of them all. Can you, if we say your timeline seems to be based on your PST scores, 10 months to a year, are you willing to put the work in for 10 months to a year? There's the
huge
gut.
gut check.
There it is.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you too. My gut check at Buds was just like, man, this sucks being treated like this for 6 months. you know, I mean,
Yes.
I feel like I'm a
Honestly, like officers probably in some degree had it. Where were you at in the hierarchy of your officers in your class? Were you
um
like
one phase I was the class leader because I
okay.
was the senior officer.
So that's what I
But
say. Yeah,
yeah,
the officers, especially you. I don't know. Like I've never actually asked someone that in your position, like as an officer who successfully navigated it and took leadership positions in first, second, or third phase. What was that like? Like
well,
was it?
That's a really good question. We definitely go into greater in depth on this on maybe a different show. But
There we go. Yeah,
I will tell you this: having other things to worry about other than
yeah,
myself, I thought it was. I don't want to say it was easier. It was. I didn't have internal awareness of what was going on. I was kind of focused externally
oh, I
on
see.
everything. So I was keeping track of this guy that just walked
Gotcha.
out of the
Okay.
water and quit, and this guy
Gotcha.
that,
Okay. See, I was the
head
opposite on
counts
that.
and time skit, getting
Okay.
somebody with all their gear.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I'm the complete opposite. Is once see, I would start at like, okay, handle the scenario. What the heck's going on? Okay, I'd be like, what's the game? Oh, this is the game. Then I could see the game, and I wouldn't give a damn. Then just like you, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm seeing what's going on here. Like but initially it was all about me. I was like,
Right.
okay, like how do I protect myself in this scenario? And once I see the game, then I'm like, okay, then I become a villain in the game or something. Like
Right.
I feel like I had more fun. That's my point. It's like I I could play a character differently than an officer could, right? Like I could be a
Yes.
so yeah, we should shelve this and do this totally differently because this would be fun to do. But
Yeah, I like that one.
hey, anyways, moving on. Sorry, I totally derailed the conversation.
That's all right. Back to gut check. Yeah. So once again, gut checks are relative. Gut checks are a test of your will and your physicality, right? Durability, I would say.
Yep.
Um, and the bad end of the spectrum would be they cause injury, they cause soreness to where you can't train normally the next day, um, and they have nothing to do with what you're training for.
Right.
I see.
Just to pause you, imagine guys like let's say you've already delayed entry program, you've committed to go in 8 months, you're 3 months out, you go do this 50 miler, you pull a hamstring really nasty. It takes every second of you to just heal from that to get in. And now you're like, hey, welcome to boot camp. Now you got to take a PST, pal. And you're like, what? I haven't ran in 3 months, let alone get tested. So don't put yourself in that position. Like, don't get yourself taken out of the opportunity to try before you even
Yeah.
get the opportunity to try.
We have a group here at the academy that when they're sophomores, they go run the JFK 50 miler.
Right.
And I'm never a fan of it, but I make sure they actually prepare for it so they're
Right.
not hurting. So if we have any injuries, it's usually like a rolled ankle from terrain or something.
Right.
So, but anyway, they actually have won it the last 3 years as a team. So
Nice.
I'm very proud of them for that. And here's the kicker: is I wouldn't let seniors do it who are leaving for buds in 6 months,
Yeah.
right? Because the risk reward isn't there, right? Because I usually do this little challenge to people. If they're going to do a gut check that's a long run, ultra marathon or whatever, or even just a marathon, I say, look, right now, I am running about 25 miles a week. I steady at it. So in a month, I run about 100 miles. Okay, in this particular time in my training. Let's see who runs the most in a month. Right? Yeah, you're going to get 50 miles head start on me.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to get a 50-mile head start on me, but I'll catch up to you in 2 weekends, right?
Right.
And then are you able to run the last 2 weeks of this month?
Right.
Right? And I would say probably 50% of the time somebody's still nursing some kind of ache, foot hurts, shin hurts,
Long ways.
yeah, hip hurts, right? So they're doing non-impact cardio. And I would say I'm in that little challenge with people. I'd say about half the time I am the winner at the end of that month. It's like the tortoise and the hare type of story. But that just goes to show you that did you learn anything out of that 50 miler? If you did, okay, good. chances are, you're never going to have to do that again. You definitely won't have to do it in selection.
No, no.
You
And
know,
see,
so,
the thing is like, because that's why I said, like, if you're going to do a gut check, package something that would be a tested length of time or an event or something. It's like, if I don't know where I'm coming up with this number, and so don't quote me on this. I'm thinking like what is the total length of time that if you hit all your waypoints in third phase out at the mountain, like what's the total distance you're going to cover in that week of land
hmm,
nav? And it's somewhere, I think somewhere like it's like 40-ish miles or something, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So let's say it's 36 to 40 miles, and that's the numbers in my head for some reason, but don't quote me on it. But let's say that that's what it is, and that's okay. You're saying, hey, I'm gonna go do this 40-mile hike in a 12-hour winter or something like make it worth your while to measure what does that feel like, because I'm actually gonna have to encounter that because running 50 miles for a course of selection that is not ever going to do that in a it might do it once in a single week, but that's all the total running and training and things like that. So it's like, don't compromise your tissue
Yeah.
in events in which the event is deselection, not how fast can you run this.
True. True. And
There's
I,
other
and I will
ways to
say,
work hard.
there's other benefits you can get out of those type of things, especially if you do it as a team and you're a team working towards that goal. You've been training together for 3 or 4 months before you do it. You know,
100%. Yours too is, I'm sorry, is you're these guys aren't doing a gut check. You're coaching them.
right. It
Right.
has it has thing. It definitely has benefits. And I will say this: when they first started doing it, I'm like, this is stupid. Why are we even doing this? Right? And this was like 5, 6 years ago.
I
And
remember,
like
yeah.
I don't recommend it. Somebody's just going to wind up getting hurt, and then I'm going to be focusing on your rehab for the next 2 to 3 months. And you not run at all. But over the years, I've seen the benefits from that style of group testing, group effort. It's almost like you're running with your boat crew,
Right, right.
and that
Misery loves company for sure.
that has some use, and your iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
Who's a good teammate, helping out your buddy, working on fueling strategies, all of those things come into play
Yep.
tremendously, in some gut checks. And they have 2 years before they go to buds. Right. So even if the worst thing happens and he needs surgery after this event because it was something catastrophic, we have plenty of time to repair and rebuild and get moving. So,
Right. It's like that's the thing is, so you can take something that someone wanted. I remember this was an idea, but this idea that has come from, okay, we have this known distance in this pretty known area that the running terrain is fairly flat. It's pretty straightforward and consistent. Now, if we take this unique group of people and we train them in a way, in a team format, right? And now we plop them in this known event. Well, now there's a lot of comparative data, especially now that you're saying they've won it like 3 years in a row. You're not
yeah.
letting them doing as seniors. It becomes this coach plan thing that again isn't a gut check. And I think that's the my big summary again is, if you're just doing something acutely difficult, that's like you're going, I'm going to go to this event, because that's how this all started. There's an email sent to us that was saying some sort of like special operation experience, come do this gut check thing, spend this money. And he's like, what are your thoughts on this? And I was like, listen, like I said, as a coach, I said, my advice on anything is, what's my takeaway on this? Like, what do I gain out of this? Like, what sort of knowledge of experience? What sort of, like, there's no assurity. There's no certainty that this course is going to give me success. But what is this course aiming to give me? Because I said, if it's just an experience, when I'm hoping to gain actual experience and understanding, where am I at? Do I need to train harder? Do I
Yeah.
need to train more? Like, So that's what we're all getting, because that's what I said. That's what all these guys want to know. It's like, hey, is my training on point? Do I have a good program and process? And it's like, where am I at? Like, what sort of milestones should I be looking at? Like, that's what every true candidate really wants to know. So I was saying, like, if it's not answering one or two of those things or trying to help you do that, and it's just experience, I said, personally, I just wouldn't spend the money on it. So whatever it might be, a 50 mile or a this or that, a weekend here, coming to see Stu. I mean, it's like if I've trained, if I have a year timeline I'm working on, and I plan on going to do this event, the midway point or somewhere, and it's a part of my plan,
Yeah.
and all these measurables leading up to it, because I want to go in to compete, because I want to see, oh, this is a known distance, and I know
Yep.
this distance is also a competitive distance for my selection. So it's build these milestones into it, because again, like I said, if you build this plan out, you put these milestones in it, you follow through, you keep your notes, you make some mistakes, you fix your mistakes, then a couple other things good. It's good to train all year round, but and all of a sudden, bam, you're like, well, am I ready? And you're like, yeah, like I'm ready. I'm killing the numbers. I feel great. Everything, but I feel healthy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you get. But it takes that gut check of, well, here's your year. Let's see if you can see if you can be consistent.
No, that was the most logical placement of a gut check that there is, what you just mentioned. Part of your timeline, midway, let's see where I am. I've never been under a log, I've never been under a boat. There's some programs out there that allow that opportunity, if that's what you want. Um, and if you're not coming out of it with lessons learned, it probably wasn't that useful for you.
Yep.
Right. And the
Yep.
lessons learned, typically you see, like the fueling strategies, but sometimes don't do a knee jerk reaction because there's one event that you didn't do well on. Right. Let's practice some techniques. Let's practice some conditioning around that. Something like, for instance, I see like the first time someone's under a log, they always come back and say, I really think I need to work my shoulders more. I'm like, we're already working your shoulders, right? And I promise you this, that's why log PT sucks so bad, is I don't care how rock solid
Nobody
your
wins.
shoulders are, you're going to fail with
Yes.
your shoulders, right?
Yeah.
That's why we teach a push press version of it. So you're kind of using your legs to help. And, so there's some techniques to get around that. But here's the key is when you're in a chest carry, you can rest your shoulders. Whenever you're running it on your shoulders, you can kind of rest your shoulders, right? When you're overhead, yeah, that sucks, and it doesn't. I don't care who you are. It's kind of like doing a hang on a pull-up bar.
Yep.
You're not going to last
Gravity
long.
is going to win.
Yes, yeah, that's just the way it is, and
That's the design too.
yeah. So you just have to, one, get used to those events. Yes, you can work some more shoulders if you want, maybe a different method, maybe a different grip, something. But where people go wrong on that is they'll do shoulders every day now, because they sucked at it, and now I'm just going to do a whole bunch of it every day, and then wonder why their shoulders hurt, 2 weeks later.
Yep.
So
Yep.
like you just said, have it part of the system, have some tangibles there that you're measuring, assessing, and then you're going to see strengths and weaknesses. You're going to see things that you're able to compete with and things that maybe you're in the bottom 50% of. Those are the things that you work on. And be honest with you, sometimes the answer isn't more volume,
Right.
right?
Yep.
The answer might be a technique issue. It might be
Agreed.
just you need to be a little bit more conditioned and handle that a little bit better. Maybe you need to put on 10 pounds of muscle mass, to be a little more sturdy under those type of loads. So
Right. Yep.
everybody
And
has a little bit of difference, but that's where coaching comes in, and you can help you with that versus trying to recreate your own wheel and figure it out for yourself.
that's a perfect segue, because that's what I was going to say is like the mystery. A lot of people is like, okay, well, if you have a coach and you say at least at the very least, like, hey, coach, Stu, Jeff, in an email, here's my timeline. It's like, here I've tried to construct some sort of, we'll call them athletic challenges instead of gut checks throughout my process, like one every 4 to 6 months. Here they are, I've built them out. Could you help me shape them? Or like, hey, like reason, like, it's like, but the thing is, like, you got to give yourself a little, just, it doesn't have to be super complex. It's like, you can use the PST parameters, but I would also go to say, okay, well, in your training log, in your training workouts, whatever, there should be some sort of stuff in there that if you took any notes, you would have seen progress.
Yeah.
Right. So really, that's why we're saying be consistent. But if Stu's just right, ask your coach. Have your coach help you build out a couple little milestone work that are relevant to what you think and your coach thinks should be tested and why, right? Because now, yes, the ultimate goal is to go do that special operations things. But if you and your coach plan not easy, but reasonable milestones throughout, and you start achieving them, all more reason for you to go, whoa, my progress is real. It's mine. It's not like it's this sort of one day I'm strong, next day I'm not, right? You'll own it. And then I think that
Yeah.
that's also like the biggest question someone wants to know is like, well, when am I ready? Well, that's what the milestones will help show you, and your consistency that you and your coach helped you plan out.
Yeah, and I would say in history, looking back at all the people who have had really good gut check events, whether it was a Naval Academy screener event or some of these exposure weekends that they're now doing around the nation, um, and you're competing with folks, you're getting cold, you're running wet, you're playing with a log, you're playing with a boat, all these little things that they're doing, um, and you finish that thing and you realize things are working. I don't know what it is, but I've seen guys come back from those events with this newfound gear in their ability. Not just a like max pull up thing, but you know they just got another gear that they can just shift into and just keep on moving. Whether that is a long run, a long calisthenics mixed in there, maybe even a lift or something, and then right after that, there's a swim workout you're going to do, and there's just no hesitation. It's just a boom, 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 boom. You found this extra gear
Yep.
that keeps you moving, and
Yep. And that's what I mean.
those are
Gut
those are
checks
the
never,
useful things that I
like, you're
think you
right.
find.
These monster mashes or gut checks or whatever we're looking at, like what they end up doing is they solidify this person's ability to continue going beyond what they have ever done. Like there's this
Yes.
sense of like, what's the longest baseball game or football game or hockey or rugby or longest, like what's the longest? The longest you'll ever do is in special operations. That's when.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when. And see, but we all kind of know that, and it's subconsciously you know that, and you're like, there's a point in buds because you hit it, you nailed it, man. Like it's like I felt it, like I experienced that. There was a point in buds, like in day 2 or 3, where I was like, oh, like this, they're just gonna make this miserable for 6 weeks, 6 months. Oh, okay, I got it. Check.
Okay.
Okay, that's the game,
Yeah.
right? And then you go, well, that doesn't mean you made it, but if I go, okay, well, it's just at that moment I accepted it.
Yeah. I mean, but let's face it. Buds is a gut check.
Yep.
It is a
Right.
6 month long gut check, and the one thing probably the most important thing I came out of that with is knowing that my body is 10 times stronger than I thought it was.
Yeah. Yep. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was a useful outcome of a gut check.
Right. That's what you get. You get this sense of like the body can really take a tremendous amount of what I previously considered of dangerous abuse, for lack of my words, not like so when somebody is all they've ever known is a very strict but difficult sport, there's limitations to that. Then you start getting into extreme sports and military, and they're like, whoa, they're like, wait, like there's actual risk of life, limb, or death. at any given time. Like I better, I better focus.
Yeah.
And there's this acceptance of like, well, I have to come every day with my A game because that's the standard.
Yes. Yeah. I like that, Jeff. That was a great idea, posting that video. And what did you say? It was an email, just somebody saying,
Yeah,
should they go
someone
to
was
one of these gut check
right. That
things?
was just like, hey, I had this opportunity to go do this thing. He's like, his concern was that if I go do this event, this 3-day event, that it will be physically challenging enough that it'll actually set my training back. He goes, I'm on track. Here's my numbers. I'm like, what do you think about this event? And like, that's why I don't talk about other events. It's none of my, like, whatever. That's, I
Yeah.
say, hey, experience, or is it, am I going to get some from it if I'm spending money? And that's really merely what it came from. And it was like, I'm sure. And that is, let me say that that is in no way for me to discredit events that put on experiences, because some experiences are worth, like, I'm not shy. I just, from my personal experience, Jeff, would like to go to an event where I can learn,
Yes.
gain some way of measuring. Hey, I can get better in this way fundamentally.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're here's something that I think Spec War is trying to do. They have a whole new assessment and recruitment team that actually puts on these free exposure weekends. And I'm in talks with them now about coming up here to doing one. And I can put you in touch with the guys that do it, and you can probably put one together down there as well. And they're just basically, they bring all their stuff, a whole truckload full of logs and boats and cold water somewhere. And in fact, they were talking about trying to come here in January. I'm like, you don't want to do that because water's like 38.
Yeah,
So let's wait till like March or April when it's in the 50s. That'd be a little bit more like a winter hell week type
right,
cold,
exactly.
which is sucks too. But anyway, those are free, right? So if you're in the delayed entry program, you might be able to squeeze one of those in somewhere, depending on where they are in the nation doing them.
Right.
But I think 2025 they're going to try to start implementing some of those. So I'm interested to see how that works.
Yeah.
Um, but
I
it's
think,
cool.
I know you and I
It's
are famously for saying like that same thing. Like if it don't let something that's not meant to measure you. But if something, it's like, well, what is that measurement? That measurement might be, I just need to get my ass kicked sometimes. That we could have a whole other show on that, because sometimes you're like, you know what? I kind of agree with that, because jujitsu does that a lot for warriors. It humbles you. Like, I think that
yeah,
that's reality, is like there's this quest of masculine or achievement doing that is seems to be very sort of rewarded by that, that, so one way of getting it, so I think that for when it comes to like the gut check and what do you try to get out of it, it's just, I don't think any of it's really really bad, unless there's no way for you to go, well, just like Stu said, what did I get out of it? What's the point? And it may not have to be big, because if you have a really well laid plan, it might just be this one little puzzle on there that just makes sense.
true. Yeah, and it may just be that little bit of confidence that you needed to take it to the next step and say, all right, I'm ready to go join. I think I'm ready.
Yep.
I was competitive with a whole bunch of my peers. Those are types of things that you can get out of some of these types of gut
Yeah.
checks
The
out
last
there.
the last thing I'll say is, the good thing is putting something like that in there, that it makes you commit. It you have to see something through before you have to see the thing through that you can't back out of. So that's one other thing that I'm kind of like, yeah, like I can totally agree with a little bit of a athletic sort of endeavor, monster mash gut check situation that's been planned by you and your coach. Because I want you to commit to this. Don't back out. I want you to measure it accurately. Don't screw around. Don't cut corners. Don't fuck around on distances. Don't,
Yeah,
don't. don't have a bad meal the night before and party. Like, let's set the scenario up like this is like a PST serious week.
You're right, right. I like that. Something that I would say I learned from pre-buds type training was, seeing somebody in a UDT SEAL shirt, right, an actual instructor who is now yelling at me, right, in a way that I have not been yelled at before. And I'm like, okay, that's something to get
Here,
used to. You
here.
know, because it's like, that kind of sucks. It is a little intimidating, and it was something that you had to build your confidence around,
Yeah.
for sure. So,
And it's
it's
because you can't simulate that, folks. Like,
no,
you can't simulate in yourself the bud student who really, really, really intends on giving their all, and having somebody who you respect say the most demeaning things to you ever and go, this is normal. I got to normalize this right now.
yes,
I got to normalize this. You can't go to any event and ever normalize that. So that's why it's like, okay, what are you really afraid of? Did you prepare, or are you afraid can your ego handle it? Because if you have to go to an event to handle your ego, man, get out of here. Like, you ain't. But if you're
yeah,
going to the event to go, hey man, like, you know what, if there's a type of person goes, I have a bit of an anger issue and I don't like people yelling at me, so I'm going to this event to handle that, not to laugh
yes,
out, to like, hey man, I gotta desensitize this part of me that's kind of always been a bit of a scrapper. Maybe,
yeah,
maybe,
yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. That's just, anyways. We could go on and on about it, but
absolutely.
all this has a plan. Have a plan.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Jeff, I loved it. Thank you so much, for coming up with this idea. And
You
for
bet.
those of you who, looking for Jeff's programming, you can find him at performancefirstus.com. You can find me over here at stewsmithfitness.com, and you can check out our podcast, which I think this is number 242.
Nice.
I know we haven't done all of them together, but
A lot
we've
of them.
done we've done probably 200 of them.
Probably a lot. Yeah.
And so I appreciate you always taking time to chat with me.
You betcha.
But I definitely think after this show we could definitely come up with a couple of more topics, to discuss, and kind of take it to another level.
Yep, we'll do. We got a few in the, I guess, in the chamber for the new year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
All right, man. 2025. Let's go get them.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.